Welcome back to Cyberspace. I'm your host, Leslie Poston, and today we're doing a deep dive into the psychological dimensions of climate change. We'll explore how climate change reshapes our thoughts, behaviors, and societal structures, and we'll also discuss practical strategies for fostering mental resilience and societal adaptation. Our episode will take us through the intricacies of the human mind as it grapples with one of the most pressing issues of our time. We'll explore the rise of climate anxiety, the psychological barriers that hinder action, and the motivations that drive change. We'll dig into the role of denial and cognitive dissonance, the power of community resilience, and the future of environmental psychology. Along the way, we'll also examine how climate change is reshaping our work lives, our daily routines, and even our relationship with food. What about climate anxiety and mental health? Let's start by diving into the heart of climate anxiety. This phenomenon, characterized by persistent worry about the future of our planet, has become increasingly prevalent in recent years. A study published in The Lancet found that 45% of children and young people say climate anxiety negatively impacts their daily lives. It's not just a fleeting concern, it's a profound psychological distress that's reshaping how an entire generation views their future. Dr. Susan Clayton explains, "We're seeing high levels of anxiety and worry about climate change in countries around the world. Climate anxiety is linked to observations about climate change and its impacts, as well as concerns about future impacts. But what exactly does climate anxiety look like? It can manifest in various ways. Persistent feelings of doom or hopelessness about the future, difficulty concentrating on daily tasks due to worry about climate issues, sleep disturbances or nightmares related to climate disasters, or physical symptoms like headaches or nausea when thinking about climate change." The American Psychological Association has recognized the severity of this issue, stating that the long-term effects of climate change on mental health can be severe, leading to depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder. However, we must understand that climate anxiety is not necessarily a pathology. Some researchers argue that these feelings are simply a rational response to a real threat, and I agree. The key lies in how we channel these emotions. Can we transform our logical anxiety into action? Can we use our concern as a catalyst for change? These are questions we'll explore throughout our episode today. Let's start by thinking about psychological barriers to climate action. Now that we understand the emotional toll of climate change, let's examine why, despite this anxiety, many people struggle to take or support action against climate change. Several psychological barriers come into play here. First, let's talk about distance bias. Climate change often feels like a distant threat, both in time and space. Dr. Elke Weber, a professor at Princeton University, found that people tend to discount the importance of events that will happen, number one, in the future, and two, to people in other places. This psychological distance makes it challenging for people to prioritize climate action in their daily lives. Next, we have what some researchers call doom fatigue. The constant barrage of negative news about climate change can lead to emotional exhaustion and disengagement. Journalist David Wallace Wells, author of The Uninhabitable Earth, considers it a natural human response to turn away from painful news, also noting that we can't afford to look away from climate change. The bystander effect also plays a role. In large-scale issues like climate change, individuals often feel that their actions won't make a difference, leading to inaction. Psychologist Robert Gifford calls this the drop-in-the-bucket effect, explaining that people feel that their contribution would be so small in the face of this massive problem that it's just not worth it to take an action. Lastly, we encounter what we call system justification theory. This theory suggests that people have a tendency to defend and bolster the status quo, even when it harms them. Dr. Irina Fagina and her colleagues found that this tendency can lead people to deny environmental problems and resist pro-environmental change. Understanding these barriers is important. It allows us to design more effective strategies for encouraging climate action. For instance, making the impact of climate change feel more immediate and personal can help overcome distance bias. Mother Nature is doing a good job of doing that for us this year. Breaking down large goals into smaller, achievable actions can combat the feeling of inefficacy that fuels the bystander effect. As we move forward, remember, awareness of these barriers is the first step in overcoming them. Having explored the barriers to action, why don't we turn our attention to what actually drives people to adopt environmentally friendly practices? And that's motivation. Understanding motivation is key to fostering meaningful change. One fundamental concept in this area is the distinction between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation comes from within. It's about personal satisfaction, personal values, and personal beliefs. Extrinsic motivation, on the other hand, is driven by external rewards or punishments. Research has shown that intrinsic motivation tends to be more powerful and long-lasting when it comes to environmental behaviors. A study by Whitmarsh and O'Neill found that individuals with a strong pro-environmental self-identity were more likely to engage in a range of pro-environmental behaviors consistently. Dr. Tim Kasser, a professor of psychology at Knox College, emphasizes the importance of aligning environmental actions with personal values. He found that when people pursue pro-environmental behaviors because such behaviors fit with their deeper values and beliefs, they are more likely to maintain those behaviors and to feel good about doing so. Social norms also play an outsized role in shaping environmental behavior. We're strongly influenced by what we perceive others around us to be doing. A classic study by Cialdini et al. Demonstrated that people were more likely to litter in an already littered environment, highlighting the power of descriptive norms. Interestingly, recent research has shown that leveraging social norms can be a powerful tool for promoting pro-environmental behavior. For example, a study by van der Linden found that informing people about the pro-environmental behavior of others in their community could significantly increase their own intentions to act in environmentally friendly ways. Another important factor is self-efficacy. That's the belief in one's own ability to make a difference. Dr. Albert Bandura, a pioneering psychologist in this field, said that unless people believe they can produce desired effects by their actions, they have very little incentive to act or to persevere in the face of difficulty. So, how can we apply these insights? Here are a few ideas. Connect environmental action to personal values. Highlight positive social norms around eco-friendly behaviors. Empower individuals by showing the impact of their actions. And create supportive communities that reinforce pro-environmental behaviors. By understanding and leveraging these motivational factors, we can create more effective strategies for encouraging sustainable behavior. As we look deeper into the psychology of climate change, we encounter two powerful forces that often hinder our ability to confront this global challenge: denial and cognitive dissonance. Denial in the context of climate change is not just about rejecting scientific evidence. It's a complex psychological defense mechanism that helps us cope with uncomfortable truths. Dr. Renee Lertzman, a psychologist specializing in environmental issues, found that denial is not simply a matter of ignorance or stupidity. Her work states that it's instead a complex psychological dance that all humans engage in to some extent. There are different forms of denial when it comes to climate change. There's literal denial, refusing to accept that climate change is happening. There's interpretive denial, accepting the fact that it's happening, accepting the facts around it, but interpreting them differently. And then there's implicatory denial, accepting the facts, but denying or minimizing the psychological, political, or moral implications. Understanding these nuances is important. It helps us approach this issue with empathy rather than judgment. Closely related to denial is the concept of cognitive dissonance. This psychological discomfort occurs when our actions don't align with our beliefs. In the context of climate change, many people experience cognitive dissonance when they understand the threat of climate change but continue the behaviors that contribute to it. Dr. Robert Gifford called this the dragon of inaction. People know climate change is a problem, but we all like our comfortable lifestyle. This contradiction creates internal discomfort, which people often resolve by downplaying the importance of climate change rather than embracing the discomfort of changing our behavior. Acknowledging these psychological mechanisms is necessary for several reasons. It helps us understand our own reactions and those of others. It allows us to design more effective communication strategies around climate change. And it opens up possibilities for gentle, non-judgmental approaches to behavior change. For instance, instead of bombarding people with more facts, which can sometimes reinforce denial as we covered on a previous episode, we might focus on creating positive visions of a sustainable future. Write utopian stories about the future, if you will. Or we could help people align their actions with their values, reducing cognitive dissonance in a constructive way. As researchers Markowitz and Sharif suggest, understanding these psychological barriers can help us design more effective climate change interventions and communications. Now, let's shift our focus from individual psychology to the power of community and collective effort. While individual actions are important, tackling climate change requires large-scale coordinated effort. This is where community resilience and collective action come into play. Community resilience refers to the ability of a community to withstand, adapt to, and recover from adversity. In the context of climate change, resilient communities are better equipped to handle environmental challenges and to support their members' mental health. Research has shown that social ties are often more important than wealth or infrastructure in determining how well communities bounce back from disaster. Studies have found that communities with strong social networks and high levels of civic engagement tend to be more resilient in the face of climate-related challenges. This insight has profound implications for addressing climate anxiety. By fostering strong community bonds, we can create support systems that help individuals cope with the psychological burden of climate change. Community gardens, local environmental groups, and neighborhood disaster preparedness teams are all examples of initiatives that can boost both community resilience and our individual well-being. Collective action, on the other hand, refers to the coordinated efforts of a group to achieve a common goal. When it comes to climate change, collective action can take many forms, from local initiatives to global movements. The power of collective action is evident in movements like Fridays for the Future, initiated by Greta Thunberg. This global movement has mobilized millions of young people to demand climate action. Researchers Bamberg et al. Noted that collective action can transform feelings of powerlessness into a sense of agency and hope. Interestingly, engaging in collective action doesn't just benefit the cause. It also has positive psychological effects on the individuals involved. Studies have found that participation in collective climate action was associated with increased well-being and a stronger sense of efficacy. Here are some highlights. Here are some strategies for fostering community resilience and collective action. Encourage local community initiatives focused on sustainability. Support intergenerational climate action to leverage diverse perspectives and diverse skills. Use social media and technology to connect with like-minded individuals and to amplify collective efforts. And celebrate small wins to maintain your motivation and your momentum. That's important too. As we talked about in a previous episode, we can't affect change without hope and joy. By shifting our focus from individual responsibility to collective action, we can create a more empowering narrative around climate change. As environmental scholar Joanna Macy put it, active hope is waking up to the beauty of life on whose behalf we can act. We belong to this world. As we look to the future, it's clear that psychology will play an increasingly vital role in addressing climate change. The field of environmental psychology is rapidly evolving, offering new insights and strategies for tackling this global challenge. One exciting development is the integration of psychological insights into policymaking. Dr. Elke Weber, whom we mentioned earlier, has been at the forefront of this effort. She argues that by understanding how people perceive risks, process information, and make decisions, we can design more effective climate policy. For example, research in behavioral economics has shown that how options are presented, known as choice architecture, can significantly influence decision making. This insight is being used to encourage more sustainable choices, from our energy use to our food consumption. Another promising area is the development of educational programs that incorporate psychological principles. Dr. Clayton said that environmental education is not just about imparting knowledge, but about fostering a connection to nature, about building efficacy, and about developing problem-solving skills, and I agree. Some innovative approaches in this area include nature-based learning programs that foster emotional connections to the environment, gamification of sustainability concepts to engage younger audiences, and mindfulness practices that enhance awareness of our relationship with the natural world. Technology is also opening up new possibilities in environmental psychology. Virtual reality, for example, is being used to help people viscerally experience the potential impact of climate change. A study by An et al. Found that VR experiences of ocean acidification lead to greater concern about climate change and intentions to change behavior. Looking ahead, there are some key areas where environmental psychology would be likely to make significant contributions. Developing strategies to combat eco-anxiety and promote psychological resilience, refining communication strategies to more effectively convey climate science, designing interventions to overcome psychological barriers to climate action, and exploring the psychological impact of climate adaptation and mitigation efforts. As researchers Swim et al. Found, psychology can help to improve the understanding of human responses to climate change and to inform our efforts to develop strategies for mitigation and for adaptation. The psychological impact of climate change goes far beyond our personal lives and into the realm of work and economic stability. As our planet warms, it's not just ecosystems that are changing. Our entire economic landscape is shifting, bringing both challenges and opportunities. One of the most significant impacts is the rise of climate anxiety in the workplace. A survey by Yale University found that 70% of Americans are worried about climate change, and this concern is increasingly spilling over into our professional lives. Employees are questioning the environmental impact of their work, leading to what some psychologists are calling climate guilt. Dr. Lertzman noted that we're seeing a growing number of people experiencing moral distress related to their jobs. She called out industries perceived as contributing to climate change as creating more moral distress. This psychological strain can lead to decreased job satisfaction, lower productivity, and even sudden career changes and high turnover. On the flip side, we're also witnessing the emergence of new green jobs and the greening of existing industries. The International Labor Organization estimates that the transition to a green economy could create 24 million new jobs globally by 2030. This shift is not just changing what we do, but how we think about work entirely. Many people, especially the younger generations, are seeking careers that align with their environmental values and that take better care of the planet. However, this transition also brings challenges. Some communities, particularly those dependent on fossil fuel industries, are facing economic uncertainty. The psychological impact of this instability can be severe. leading to increased stress, depression, and anxiety. To address these challenges, psychologists are working with policymakers and business leaders to develop strategies for a just transition, one that considers the psychological well-being of both workers and communities. Some of the strategies they're exploring are retraining programs that not only teach new skills, but that also address the emotional challenges of career transitions. Community-based initiatives that foster resilience and social support during economic shifts. Or workplace programs that help employees cope with climate anxiety and find meaning in sustainability efforts. It's also worth noting the psychological impact of extreme weather events on work and economic stability. As climate change increases the frequency and severity of these events, more workers are facing disruptions and uncertainties. A study by Burke et al. Found that higher temperatures reduce cognitive function and productivity, potentially leading to significant economic losses. Climate change contributes to additional new viruses in the world that spread and reduce worker productivity, students being in school, and more. The researchers estimate that unmitigated climate change could reduce average global income by 23% as soon as 2100. As we navigate these changes, it's clear that addressing the psychological dimensions of work in a changing climate will be essential for both individual well-being and economic resilience. Let's zoom in on how climate change is reshaping our daily lives and our social interactions. The effects of global warming are not just abstract future scenarios, they're already influencing how we live, how we relate to each other, where we live, and the structure of our societies. One of the most immediate impacts is the psychological effect of increased heat waves. Research has suggested a relationship between higher temperatures and increased irritability, aggression, and violence. But it's not just about temperature. Changes in weather patterns are altering our social rhythms and our traditions. Climate change is affecting everything from when we plant our gardens to how we celebrate our holidays. These shifts can disrupt our sense of normalcy and our connection to our community. For example, warmer winters are shortening the ice fishing season in northern regions, impacting not just recreation, but also social bonding traditions. In other areas, prolonged droughts are changing how communities gather and celebrate water-dependent festivals. Climate change is also influencing patterns of human migration, which in turn affect social dynamics. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change noted that climate change is likely to lead to increased displacement of people in the coming decades, both within and across national borders. Researchers emphasize that climate-induced migration isn't just about physical relocation. It's also about the psychological challenges of leaving behind familiar environments, our cultures, and familiar social networks. These migrations can lead to increased social tensions, but they can foster new norms of community and solidarity as well. On a more personal level, climate change is influencing how we think about our futures and how we make life decisions. Researchers have found that climate anxiety is affecting major life choices, particularly among younger generations. As we adapt to these changes, psychologists emphasize the importance of maintaining social connections and community resilience. Creating spaces for people to share their climate-related emotions and experiences can help combat feelings of isolation and foster collective coping strategies. Some emerging strategies for maintaining social cohesion in the face of climate change include community climate cafes, where people can discuss their climate concerns and ideas. Intergenerational mentoring programs that connect climate-aware youth with older community members who may be resistant. Neighborhood resilience hubs that serve as gathering spaces during extreme weather events. And digital platforms that facilitate local climate action and community building. As we move forward, understanding and addressing these social and psychological dimensions will be necessary for building resilient, adaptable, flexible communities in a changing climate. Our final segment digs into a topic that touches every aspect of our lives: food. Climate change is significantly impacting global food systems, and these changes have profound implications for both our physical and our mental health. Let's start with the basics. Climate change is altering what we can grow and where we can grow it. Dr. Cynthia Rosenzweig, a climate impact specialist at NASA, explains we're seeing shifts in crop yields, changes in the nutritional content of our food, and increased volatility in our food production. These changes don't just affect our diet, they can have significant psychological impact. Dr. Helen Berry, a professor of climate change and mental health at the University of Sydney, has studied the mental health effects of drought on farming communities and notes that the stress of crop failures and financial instability can lead to increased rates of depression, anxiety, and even suicide among farmers. The psychological impact of food insecurity extends beyond rural communities. In urban areas, rising food prices due to climate-related supply disruptions can lead to increased stress and food anxiety, particularly among low-income populations. Food insecurity is not just about hunger. It's also about the stress and anxiety of not knowing where your next meal will come from. This chronic stress can have long-term effects on mental health. Studies have found that food insecurity is associated with higher rates of mental health problems in both children and adults. There's also the emerging field of research focusing on how climate-induced changes in our diets might impact our mental health. Dr. Felice Jacques, director at the Food and Mood Center at Deakin University, has pioneered research on the link between diet and mental health. She notes, as climate change alters food availability and affordability, it could impact population mental health through changes in dietary pattern. For example, if climate change reduces the availability of foods rich in omega-3 fatty acids, like certain fish species, it could potentially impact brain health on a population level. On a more positive note, the challenges posed by climate change are also spurring innovations in food production and distribution. Urban farming, vertical agriculture, and community-supported agriculture are all growing trends that not only address food security, but can also provide psychological benefits. Research has found that participating in community gardens can reduce stress, increase self-esteem, and foster a sense of community. These benefits can be particularly valuable in building psychological resilience to climate-related stressors. Looking ahead, addressing the intersection of climate change, food security, and mental health will require interdisciplinary approaches, such as integrating mental health support into climate adaptation programs for farmers and food workers, developing climate-resilient agriculture techniques that also consider nutritional and psychological impact, creating community food initiatives that enhance both food security and social cohesion, and educating the public about the mental health benefits of sustainable plant-rich diets. As we face the challenges ahead, it's clear that protecting our food systems in the face of climate change is needed, not just for our physical health, but for our cultures and our collective mental well-being. As we wrap up our exploration of the climate-stressed mind, it's clear that the psychological dimensions of climate change are as complex and far-reaching as the physical changes to our planet. From the rise of climate anxiety to the reshaping of our work lives, social dynamics, and relationship with food, climate change is fundamentally altering how we think, feel, and behave. Within these challenges lie opportunities. By understanding the psychology of climate change, we can develop more effective strategies for adaptation and mitigation. We can design policies that consider not just the physical impacts of climate change, but also its effects on mental health and social cohesion. We can create educational programs that foster both environmental knowledge and psychological resilience. Most importantly, we can recognize that our responses to climate change, both individual and collective, are deeply rooted in our psychology. By acknowledging our anxieties,
confronting our cognitive biases, and harnessing the power of community resilience, we can move from a place of fear and inaction to one of hope and proactive change. As we face these climate challenges ahead, let's remember the words of environmental scholar Joanna Macy. The most remarkable feature of this historical moment on Earth is not that we are on the way to destroying the world. We've actually been on that way for quite a while. It is that we are beginning to wake up, as from a millennia-long sleep, to a whole new relationship to our world, to ourselves, and to each other. Understanding the climate-stressed mind is a first step in this awakening. By bridging the gap between climate science and human psychology, we can foster a more resilient, adaptable, and ultimately hopeful approach to our changing world. I'm your host, Leslie Poston, signing off on this episode of PsyberSpace, reminding you that in understanding our minds, we unlock the power to change the world. Until next time, remember, every mind has the potential to be a force for positive change in the climate crisis. Stay curious.